The sky above the arena was dark and full of lightning. Alien ships floated in silence, each filled with nobles, warriors, and gamblers watching the event of the year, the Death Labyrinth. No one had ever escaped it. No one had ever survived it. Today, 20 fighters stood on the metal platform, each one chosen by different species across the galaxy. Tall armored beasts from Warclaw, shadow assassins from Nor, and a glowing jelly creature from the moons of Syraxa. In the middle of them all stood a human, wearing dusty clothes and old boots. Scratching his head, his name was Jackson Reed, farmer from Earth lost in a nightmare that wasn't his. Is that a human? One alien noble whispered, laughing. Someone sent a human to the Death Labyrinth? Another sneered. They'll be the first to die, said a lizard general with a hiss. Jackson looked around, confused, then looked at the countdown timer. 4, 3. He raised one hand. Excuse me, could someone tell me what this is? 2, 1. The floor opened, and all 20 contestants fell into the black pit below. Jackson screamed all the way down. They landed hard in different parts of the labyrinth. Massive walls of steel moved like shifting puzzles. The ceiling growled, with mechanical noise, and traps waited at every corner. The Death Labyrinth had begun. Jackson rolled onto the floor, coughing from the dust and impact. He got up slowly, looking around at the cold stone and sharp tiles. A torch lit up on the wall, revealing a hallway that split into 5 directions. He heard something, screaming, then silence. A warrior had already fallen. Jackson didn't run like the others. Instead, he took off one of his boots and tapped the floor gently with it. Tap, tap, tap. He crouched and pressed his ear to the ground like an old cowboy listening for trains. Back on Earth, he once helped his grandfather build a corn maze during fall festivals. The trick, his grandfather said, was never trust what you see. Listen instead. The Death Labyrinth had no maps, no rules, and no second chances. But Jackson had something different. Instinct. He chose the narrowest path, not the largest one, and he walked carefully, slowly, always tapping the floor before stepping. Behind him, a loud boom echoed. Someone had triggered an explosive trap. He didn't look back. Instead, he muttered, "Okay, Jackson, don't die stupid." He reached a hallway where the walls shimmered like water reflecting fire. One of the alien champions, a 6-armed beast called Gorok, was ahead, growling. Gorok slammed his warhammer into the ground and roared, "Out of my way, human worm." Jackson stepped aside. "Be my guest." Gorok charged ahead, roaring like a beast, then suddenly vanished. No scream, no impact, no nothing, just gone. Jackson blinked and whispered, "Noted." He threw a rock forward, and the illusion wall rippled, showing a hole with spinning blades inside. Darn, he muttered. They really don't want us walking out of here. He looked up and noticed something. Small air vents on the ceiling, releasing faint mist. That wasn't for decoration, it was how the maze tracked movement. Heat, sound, breathing. Jackson tied a cloth over his nose and moved slowly, minimizing his breath. He found a broken pipe, still warm, and crawled through it, skipping 3 main corridors. On the other side, he landed in a room full of skulls, some large, some small, all cleaned white. In the center, a red circle pulsed with soft light. The ceiling had a speaker, and it clicked. On with a robotic voice. 1 minute to solve or 1 second to burn. Jackson saw symbols on the wall. A puzzle with 12 buttons, each glowing. A Zarnathi warrior entered behind him, tall and proud. "I know this one," the alien said with confidence. "I've trained for years." He pressed 3 buttons quickly. The room exploded in red light. And the warrior turned to ash in 1 second. Jackson didn't move. He looked at the buttons, at the shadows, at the pattern in the dust. He smiled a little and said, "Old Earth trick. Never be first and never trust a clean floor." He pressed only 1 button, the one with a faded fingerprint on it. The wall opened. Jackson walked through as alarms blared in the background. Above, in the viewing chambers, the nobles leaned forward, shocked. "Who is this human?" they asked. "How is he still alive?" Jackson walked deeper into the maze, smiling slightly. "This place wants warriors," he said to himself, "but they forgot to plan for a stubborn farmer with a bag of earth tricks." As he disappeared into the next tunnel, the lights dimmed and the death labyrinth whispered, like a hungry beast sensing a new kind of prey, one that would not go down easy. The tunnel was narrow and dark. Jackson walked with slow steps, one hand against the wall, the other holding a bent metal pipe like a walking stick. Every few feet he tapped the ground with the pipe, listening, but this part of the maze was different. There were no traps here, no flames, no spinning blades, only sound. And that made it worse. At first, Jackson heard whispering, soft and distant. Then, laughter then crying. He stopped walking, trying to understand where the sounds came from. They bounced off the walls in strange ways. High one moment, low the next. Just echoes, he whispered. Just tricks. He tossed a small stone forward, but instead of hitting the floor, it vanished in midair. Then he heard his own voice echo back to him. Just tricks, but deeper, darker, almost mocking. Jackson's skin crawled. He remembered a story his grandpa told him back on Earth, about a cave where miners would hear their own screams before rocks fell. This place used fear, not just traps. Jackson sat down for a moment, breathing slow, closing his eyes. He didn't need to see. He needed to listen. He noticed the rhythm of the echoes, the way each one had a delay. The maze wasn't just throwing random noise, it was using sound to mislead its victims. A scream from the left meant danger on the right. Laughter from behind meant a pit in front. A growl from above meant the floor was false. Jackson nodded to himself, then opened his eyes. He pulled off his belt and tied it to a piece of debris, creating a makeshift sound bomb. He threw it far down one tunnel. The metal clanked loudly and echoed for miles. The maze responded fast. Walls shifted, a ceiling dropped, the floor shook, all in the wrong place. Jackson smiled. "You're predictable," he whispered. He took the opposite tunnel, silent and smooth. As he walked deeper, he saw shadows on the walls, warriors screaming, running, disappearing into blackness. They weren't real. The maze created illusions, feeding on fear. He ignored them, focused on sound and timing. Then suddenly he heard heavy breathing ahead. Real this time. Jackson pressed his back to the wall and peered around the corner. A massive alien soldier, 12 feet tall with armored skin, was slamming his fists into a wall. The beast roared, "Let me out!" Jackson knew this kind of creature. Brute strength, no brains. He picked up a loose gear from the floor and rolled it toward the alien. The sound made the beast turn and charge into the wrong tunnel, triggering a spinning trap that swallowed him whole. Jackson winced. "Rest in peace, big guy." But the moment wasn't over. The sound of the trap attracted something else, something fast. He heard clicking claws, light footsteps, and a wet, hissing sound. Something was crawling upside down on the ceiling. Jackson froze, his heart pounding. He looked up slowly and saw it. Long limbs, sharp eyes, and no mouth. It moved like a spider, but had the face of a child. The creature dropped silently behind him, watching, studying. Jackson didn't run. Instead, he held still, breathing soft, and did something strange. He whistled, a soft, low earth tune, something harmless, almost playful. The creature tilted its head, confused. It moved around him, curious. Then Jackson did it again, but this time he changed the pitch, bouncing the sound off the wall. The creature turned quickly and leapt toward the echo, right into a collapsing trapdoor. Gone. Jackson exhaled slowly, wiping sweat from his neck. "That's right," he muttered. "Music can be deadly too." He moved on, entering a circular room with a single torch in the center. There were no exits, no doors, just walls and silence. He tapped the floor again, solid. Then he noticed the torch wasn't flickering like normal fire. It was perfectly still. Jackson stepped close and blew on it. The flame moved, but not the right way. It bent toward his breath. Not away. Airflows reversed, he muttered. Fake wall behind the fire. He touched the wall, pressed hard, and it clicked open, revealing a small maintenance tunnel. He crawled inside, his back scraping the metal ceiling. Halfway through, he saw names scratched on the wall. Hundreds of names. All different species, all crossed out. Only one name was not crossed. It read, Tarka Vess. Made it to level 3. Died screaming. Jackson frowned and added his name under it. Jackson Reed, still breathing, he reached the other side, stepping into a dim hallway that led down, deeper into the maze. As he walked, he heard the crowd above watching him through hidden cameras, alien nobles whispering, scientists taking notes. Why is the human still alive? He's not strong. He's not fast. He's cheating, but Jackson wasn't cheating. He was just using something the others had forgotten. Human creativity. As he walked deeper into the shadows, the maze shifted again, reacting to him. For the first time in its history, the Death Labyrinth had met a player it couldn't predict, and that terrified it. Jackson moved quietly through the narrow tunnel. His boots dragged across dust and metal, and his fingers touched the cold walls for balance. The tunnel opened into a round chamber, large and quiet. He paused, squinting, then stepped inside. Bones, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, piled like broken toys all around the room. Skulls from different species, some with horns, others with tusks, some with eye sockets too wide for any normal creature. In the center of the room floated a black cube, glowing faintly red. It hummed with a low vibration that tickled Jackson's chest. Above it, symbols hovered in the air, changing every few seconds. He heard a whisper, but no mouth spoke. Answer. The riddle, or become part of the pile? Jackson didn't move. He wasn't surprised anymore. This maze had already shown him death came fast and quiet. This time, it wanted to test his mind, not his body. Across the chamber, another door slowly opened and a tall figure stepped in, an armored alien with blue skin and long silver braids. She looked at Jackson, eyes glowing like ice. "Stay out of my way, human," she said coldly. "I have trained for this test." Jackson nodded politely. "Ladies first." She approached the cube and raised her hand. The symbols froze, and a voice echoed through the chamber. "I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with wind," the alien woman answered confidently. "Spirit," silence. Then a loud shriek, and in less than a second she turned to ashes, her bones dropped into the pile. Jackson winced. "That's Arsh." The cube rotated toward him. Symbols formed again, swirling faster now. "I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with wind." Jackson frowned. He thought back to Earth, to long nights at home with no power. Grandpa used to light candles and tell stories. Sometimes they played riddles to pass the time. Jackson remembered this one. It wasn't spirit. It wasn't ghost. It was something simpler, something clever. He whispered, "Echo." The cube stopped. A soft chime played in the air. The door behind it opened slowly. Jackson let out a long breath. "Thanks, Grandpa." He walked through the door into another chamber, smaller, dimly lit. But this time, no bones, just one chair in the center, facing a blank wall. As he stepped closer, the wall flickered and turned into a screen. Images flashed, fast and confusing. Memories. He didn't recognize a ruined village, a crying child, a burning ship, a hand reaching out, then his face, older, scarred, full of rage. Jackson stepped back. "That's not me," he muttered. The voice returned, softer now, almost kind. "You passed the riddle, but now you must face truth." "Which truth?" Jackson asked, his voice shaking slightly. "The truth you fear," the voice replied. The screen showed Earth, broken and abandoned. He saw himself walking alone, shouting names that echoed with no answer. "No," Jackson whispered. "This isn't real." The room grew colder, and the images clearer. A false memory tried to bury itself in his mind, one where Jackson never left Earth, one where everyone was gone, and he was the last. But Jackson shook his head. He clenched his fists, breathing steady. "This maze feeds on fear," he said out loud. "It's trying to break me." He walked toward the screen and punched it. The image shattered like glass. The room reset. Bright. Lights came on. The fake chair vanished and a hidden staircase appeared. Jackson smirked. "Not today." As he climbed the stairs, he noticed something carved into each step. Words alien languages at first, but then one in English. "Your mind is the true key." At the top he reached another hallway, lit by glowing stones. A soft voice whispered from the walls. "You're different, human." Jackson ignored it. He had no interest in listening to the maze anymore. It had lied, it had tricked, it had killed. Now he was the one playing games. Ahead, he saw a shattered camera drone sparking on the floor. Someone had destroyed it recently. Jackson knelt beside it and examined the damage claw marks, but not from a beast. These were precise, intelligent. That meant someone else was still alive. In the maze, someone clever, maybe like him. He stood and moved forward, more alert than before. Another riddle might come, another illusion, another trap. But now he knew their pattern. He knew the trick wasn't strength or speed. It was knowing when to trust your senses and when not to. Jackson whispered. The bones in that room weren't weak. They were just proud. They thought they were too smart to fail. And pride, he knew, was louder than any echo. He walked on, not with confidence, but with caution, because the maze had changed, and so had he. Jackson stepped into the next corridor. The floor shifted under his boots, soft and spongy like rubber. The walls were black stone, pulsing with faint red veins that glowed like lava just beneath the surface. He had a bad feeling. Up ahead, the hallway split into two paths. Left and right, both paths had giant steel doors, smooth, shining, and sealed shut. Between the doors stood two figures. One was tall, dressed in elegant golden robes with a smooth, almost glowing face. The other was smaller, wearing tattered clothes, his skin rough and cracked like dried clay. Both turned to Jackson as he approached. The one in gold bowed slightly. "Greetings, contestant," he said in a calm voice. "You've reached the test of truth." The other one laughed with a dry cough. "More like the test of madness," he said. "You'll see." Jackson narrowed his eyes. "Let me guess. One door leads to safety, the other to death." "Correct," the golden one replied. "But there's more." He gestured toward the other man. "One of us always tells the truth and the other always lies." Jackson stared at them both, quiet. "I've heard this one," he muttered. Back on Earth, this riddle was an old trick, but the maze had changed every classic rule so far. He had to be careful. The golden one stepped forward. "You may ask one of us a single question." Jackson tilted his head. "Just one?" "Yes," both figures said at the same time. He looked, at the left door, then the right, then back at the men. "Which one of you is lying?" he asked. The man in gold smiled. "He is," pointing to the ragged man. The ragged man grinned. "He is," pointing to the golden one. Jackson sighed. "Of course." He sat down on the cold floor, rubbing his temples. "Okay," he whispered. "Think like Grandpa." Back home, there was a farm dog named Rusty who always tried to trick the chickens into giving up their food. Jackson used to watch Rusty spin in circles, pretending to act lost, until the chickens let their guard down. He smiled suddenly. "Pretend to be dumb and the truth shows itself." Jackson stood up and looked at the golden one. "If I asked him," he pointed to the ragged man, "which door leads to safety, what would he say?" The golden one paused, blinked, then pointed to the left door. Jackson immediately turned and walked to the right door. He pressed his hand to the panel, and it hissed open slowly. Behind him, both men vanished in a puff of blue smoke. The hallway beyond the door was narrow and red-lit. But just 3 steps inside, the floor roared with fire. Flames burst from both sides, forming a wall that trapped him in place. Jackson rolled back, coughing from the smoke. He grabbed his jacket and used it to cover his mouth, crawling on the floor. A new voice echoed from the flames. "Smart answer, but the door was a lie too," Jackson shouted. "Then what was the point?" "To test your instincts, not your logic," the voice replied. A second set of flames roared on the opposite wall, forming a shape. A glowing doorway. Jackson squinted and saw symbols flickering in the fire, almost like coordinates. He realized something. This wasn't a hallway, it was a puzzle box. Flames weren't traps, they were clues. The false door was meant to slow him down, confuse him, maybe kill him. But the real path was hidden inside the heat. He remembered a science trick from school, how certain gases only became visible in high temperatures. He removed a thin strip of metal from his backpack, part of a bent panel he'd collected earlier. He waved it through the flames, watching the color change. The symbols on the burning wall lit up and aligned, forming a pattern. Jackson moved forward carefully, tracing the glowing path. Each step took him closer to the edge of the fire, but he followed the pattern exactly. One wrong move and he'd burn. He pressed his hand against the exact shape on the wall, and suddenly, the flames disappeared like a blown-out candle. Silence. Then the wall cracked open, revealing a cold metal chamber beyond. He stepped inside, heart pounding, shirt soaked with sweat. "Nice try, Maze," he said, catching his breath. But something strange happened next. The room was full of mirrors, tall, curved, each one reflecting not just his face but his memories. One mirror showed him running through a forest back on Earth. Another showed him as a child hiding under a table during a storm. A third showed him now, but not alone. A girl stood beside him, half hidden in shadows, eyes glowing faintly. Jackson turned, startled, but no one was there. He looked back at the mirror, still there. The voice returned, now softer, more curious. "You are not alone," Jackson frowned. "What do you mean?" "She follows your path," the voice replied. "You saved her once, and now she watches." He stared at the mirror, unsure if it was real, a memory, or a warning. But one thing was clear. Someone else was moving through the maze. And maybe, just maybe, they were not his enemy. He touched the glass and it melted away, opening the path forward. As he stepped into the next level of the death labyrinth, Jackson knew something had changed. He was no longer just a survivor. He was becoming a problem, and the maze didn't like problems it couldn't control. The air grew heavier as Jackson moved forward. The hallway narrowed, and the walls were coated in a thin green slime that pulsed softly like it was alive. His boots made wet, squelching sounds with every step. The floor began to slope downward, and a faint hiss filled the air. At first, it sounded like steam, but Jackson's instincts screamed otherwise. The hissing wasn't mechanical. It was breathing, a new kind of trap. He pulled his jacket sleeve over his mouth and took shallow breaths. Within seconds, his eyes began to sting. His head felt light. A gas, he realized. Something toxic, slow, and quiet. The corridor ahead shimmered with a light green mist, swirling like smoke underwater. Jackson dropped to his knees and crawled forward, pressing low to the floor, where the gas was thinner. But even down there, it burned. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small emergency water pouch and tore it open. He poured it over a cloth, tied it around his nose and mouth, and kept going. Each breath felt like he was swallowing needles. Suddenly, he spotted a figure slumped against the far wall just at the edge of the mist. It was small, humanoid, but not human. Jackson blinked through the haze and crawled closer. It was a girl. Young. Alien. Barely conscious, her skin a pale violet color, glowing softly under the gas. Her eyes were shut, her hands twitching weakly. Blue veins glowed through her skin, pulsing in pain. She was choking, barely hanging on. Jackson hesitated for a moment. The right thing was obvious. Help her. But the maze had no mercy, and stopping could kill him too. Still, he crawled forward and pulled her toward him, covering both their faces with the wet cloth. He leaned close and shared his breath with her. Short, shallow, but enough. She opened her eyes slightly, confused, afraid. "Don't move," Jackson whispered. "I got you." He reached for her arm and gently pulled her across the floor. Together, they crawled through the toxic mist. Step by painful step, Jackson's vision blurred, his arms trembled. The gas was getting thicker and his lungs begged for air. Just when he thought he would black out, he saw it. A small emergency vent, half buried under slime. He crawled to it and yanked the metal cover off with all his strength. Cool air rushed out, breaking through the poison. He pulled the girl close and held her near the vent, letting her breathe first. She gasped, coughed, then opened her eyes fully. "You human?" she asked weakly. Jackson nodded, coughing hard. "Yeah, still stupid enough to be alive." She tried to sit up but winced in pain. "I am Vexa, daughter of the maze builders," she said softly. Jackson blinked. "Wait, the people who made this place?" She nodded once, her voice shaky. "My father built this level, but I never finished training. I got trapped during a test run, Jackson. stared at her, stunned. "You've been stuck in here?" "For many cycles," she said. "No one ever comes this far." Jackson sat back, breathing deep. "Lucky you. I'm too stubborn to die." She looked at him carefully. "Why did you help me?" Jackson shrugged. "Because you needed help." "No one helps in this maze," she whispered. "Only killing, only escaping." He smiled faintly. "Guess I missed that memo." Vexa looked down at her glowing hands, then at the torn cloth. He had used to shield them both. "You could have let me die," she said, "and gone ahead." Jackson looked her in the eye. "Yeah, but then I'd have to live with it." She said nothing, but her eyes softened. He stood up and helped her. "To her feet, you able to walk?" he asked. "Slowly," she said. "But I know a hidden passage behind the wall." She pointed to a section of slime-covered stone. Jackson wiped it clean and found a small panel with 3 symbols. Vexa pressed them in a sequence, and the wall hissed open to reveal a tunnel, narrow but clear of gas. "This leads deeper," she said. "A shortcut my father made in case the maze broke." Jackson laughed. "I love breaking things." They stepped inside, and the wall closed behind them, sealing the poison out. The tunnel was quiet, only the sound of their footsteps echoing. Jackson looked over at her. "So, you're a princess of a murder maze," she chuckled weakly. "Something like that." He grinned. "Cool, I always wanted a weird pen pal." Vexa smiled, the first real one she had in years. As they walked, she explained the maze wasn't just a trap. It was a test for alien elites. Her father designed it to reward intelligence, creativity, and cooperation. But over time, the galaxy turned it into a blood sport. She said, "They forgot its purpose." Jackson looked ahead, thoughtful. "Maybe it's time someone reminded them," he said. Together, they moved deeper into the labyrinth, not as prey, but as something new. Not just survivors, but rebels, and the maze was starting to realize it, because for the first time in centuries, the labyrinth wasn't just being beaten, it was being outsmarted. The walls were different now. As Jackson and Vexa walked deeper into the hidden tunnel, the stone turned to polished black metal. Lights pulsed inside the walls, like veins carrying red electricity. Jackson touched the surface. It was warm, almost like skin. "This part is alive," Vexa whispered. "We're near the core." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Alive as in thinking." Vexa nodded, her face serious. "Yes, it watches, learns, and adapts," Jackson muttered. "Great, now the maze has a brain." They moved slowly, each step echoing in the quiet hallway. No traps, no puzzles, no voices, just silence. Too much silence. After all the noise before, it felt wrong. Jackson felt his neck tingle. Then the hallway opened into a vast chamber. Circular, endless, glowing with soft red light. At the center was a massive structure, a black sphere floating in the air, surrounded by spinning rings made of energy. Wires stretched from the walls, feeding into it like arteries. Vexa gasped. "The central core," she said. "The heart of the labyrinth." Jackson stepped forward, watching the rings spin faster as they approached. Suddenly, a voice filled the room. Not cold, not robotic, but something smooth and calm. "Intruder detected," it said. "Initiating psychological defense protocols." The walls flashed white, and instantly the room changed. The core disappeared, Vexa vanished. Jackson stood alone in an open field, green grass, blue sky, warm sun. Birds sang in the distance, and a small house sat nearby. Jackson froze. "No, not this," he whispered. He walked toward the house slowly, every step harder than the last. He knew this place. His old home on Earth before the war, before everything changed. He heard laughter inside, a child's voice. He opened the door and saw her, his little sister Anna, playing on the floor with wooden blocks. She looked up, smiled, and said, "You came back." Jackson's heart twisted. Anna had died years ago, taken by sickness while he was off-world. He stepped back, shaking his head. "This isn't real." The room melted around him, and he was back in the core chamber, gasping. Vexa was beside him, holding his arm. You saw something, didn't you? She asked gently. Jackson nodded, wiping his face. Yeah, my biggest failure. The core shows your deepest regret, she said. And if you believe it, you're trapped forever. Jackson looked at the floating sphere. So how do we shut it down? Vexa pointed to the rings spinning around the core. Each ring is a system. Traps, illusions, gas, sound, light, she said. But there's a weakness. Jackson tilted his head. Let me guess, something dumb and earthy like gum and wire? Vexa smiled. Close. She walked over to a wall panel, opened it, and revealed a mess of wires, crystals, and metal nodes. She pulled out a glowing orb, handed it to Jackson. This was made to respond only to unpredictable patterns. She said, It's called a logic scrambler. Jackson held the orb and grinned. Perfect. I'm great at being unpredictable. He pulled a shoelace from his boot, tied it around the orb, and swung it like a slingshot. Then, without warning, he threw it toward the spinning rings, but deliberately missed. The orb hit the floor, bounced, off a pillar, spun through the air, and slammed into the core at a strange angle. The sphere cracked, the lights flickered, the voice returned, but it wasn't calm anymore. Error, pattern deviation, unmapped behavior, recalculating. Sparks burst from the floor and the walls shook. Vexa ran to the control panel and pressed a sequence of buttons. We have 30 seconds, she shouted. The whole maze is resetting. Jackson grabbed her hand. Then let's go. They ran through the chamber toward a staircase that appeared beneath the platform. Behind them, the spinning rings shattered, and the sphere exploded into a storm of red light. Alarms screamed through the walls as systems shut down. Doors across the maze unlocked, traps froze in place, cameras went black. The death labyrinth was dying. At the top of the staircase, a door opened into a balcony. Cool wind rushed in. Jackson stepped outside, blinking in the light. The stars above looked close, almost like they were welcoming him back. Vexa stood beside him, silent. For the first time in centuries, the maze had been broken. Not by force, but by randomness, by stubbornness, by heart, by something the galaxy didn't understand. A human. Behind them, the core chamber collapsed, disappearing into the dark. Vexa turned to Jackson. They'll come for us now. The ones who built this place. The ones who profited from it. Jackson nodded. Let them come. She looked at him with curious eyes. Why aren't you afraid? He smirked. Because I've been through worse, and I still got one boot left. She laughed genuinely. Together they stared at the galaxy waiting beyond the maze, and the maze, now silent, remembered the name of the one who beat it with a simple earth trick. The wind blew across the top of the death labyrinth. Cold, fast, free. Jackson stood at the edge of the steel platform, staring at the stars above. Vexa stood beside him, her violet skin glowing softly in the pale light. Below them, the entire maze was collapsing. Walls folding inward, lights shutting off, energy bleeding from broken circuits. Sirens had stopped, traps were silent, even the whispers were gone. For the first time in galactic history, the death labyrinth had been defeated, not escaped, not cheated, beaten, and the galaxy was watching. High above, in floating arenas and orbiting satellites, thousands of alien viewers stared at their screens in disbelief. Some had bet fortunes on Jackson dying in the HFY First level. Others had laughed when the human was chosen. Now those same mouths were silent. Cameras zoomed in, catching the image of Jackson standing tall, breathing heavy, his shirt ripped, his hands burned, but still alive, and smiling. A broadcast drone floated near him, blinking red, recording everything. Jackson looked at it and said, You got all that? The drone beeped twice, confirming. Vexa stepped forward and spoke into the drone, her voice strong. I am Vexa, daughter of the builders, she said. This maze was meant to test courage, intelligence, and spirit, not kill for entertainment. Her voice echoed across every broadcast channel in the galaxy. In your greed, you turned it into a blood sport, she said. But today it ends. She held up a small data crystal, the maze's core map and history stored inside. Share this, she ordered the drone. Let every species see the truth. The drone flashed green and zipped away into the sky. Moments later, screens across the galaxy lit up with files. Secret files, blueprints, control logs. Proof that the maze was never meant to be what it became. On a gambling ship orbiting the arena, a fat alien overlord screamed in rage. He was supposed to die, he shouted, throwing credits at the screen. On a planet far away, a child clutched a toy shaped like Jackson, eyes wide with joy. "Mama, the human won," she whispered. He really won. In military bunkers, on royal ships, in poor mining towns. Everyone watched the footage. They saw Jackson crawling through poison, surviving fire, solving riddles, saving a girl he didn't know. They saw him break the unbreakable maze, and they started to believe that humans, small and strange as they were, had something the galaxy forgot. Not better weapons, not better technology, but heart. Unpredictable, foolish, stubborn heart. Back at the maze, a transport ship landed near the platform. The door opened, and a tall alien soldier stepped out, weapons lowered. He saluted Jackson. "You are free to leave," he said. "By galactic law, you are no longer a contestant." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "I was never a contestant," he said. "I was just trying not to die." Vexa smiled. "That's what makes it more powerful." They walked up the ramp side by side, inside the ship. It was quiet, clean, peaceful. Jackson leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. "I could use a shower and a sandwich," he muttered. Vexa chuckled. "I could use 10 years of sleep." The ship lifted off, rising above the wreckage of the maze below. The death labyrinth sparked one last time and went dark forever. As the stars surrounded them, Jackson looked at Vexa. "So what now?" he asked. She looked at him with a grin. "Now we show the galaxy what they forgot." He nodded slowly. "You mean common sense?" She laughed. "I mean hope." The broadcast of Jackson's escape went viral across thousands of worlds. Songs were written, statues built. Children pretended to be the Earth trick guy in street games. One phrase became famous in all languages, from Galactic Standard to the roars of the Warclaw Empire. He didn't escape the maze. He confused it until it gave up. On Earth, an old man watched the broadcast and whispered, "That boy remembered the corn maze trick." Jackson Reed became a name known across stars, not because he was the strongest or smartest, but because he was the first to treat the maze like a joke, not a prison, and in doing so, he broke it. A legend was born, and somewhere, in a quiet part of the ship, Jackson scribbled a message onto a small piece of metal and tucked it in his boot. "If you're trapped, breathe, think, and do something dumb. The smart ones never win alone." He smiled, closed his eyes, and finally rested. The galaxy would talk about warriors, champions, heroes, but none would be remembered quite like the human who escaped the death labyrinth with a sneaky Earth trick.